Welcome back, mere mortalites, to another edition of the Mere Mortals book reviews. I have another book on the Alex Rider, Anthony Horowitz written series, and it's actually the final one in the big initial release of this particular book of the Alex Rider series. And it is, unfortunately, the saddest one. Now, I read this again when it was really coming out. I never knew that there was going to be subsequent books that were going to get released, not just of Alex Rider, but of some of the other characters as well. And Anthony Horowitz actually talked about it in this particular book. I do believe right towards the tail end, or maybe in the new book that I'm currently reading. But in any case, just to give a bit of a backstory, Anthony Horowitz had been running this book since the beginning of the 2000s, and he paused in around 2011. I believe that's when this book was written. Let me just confirm. Yep, 2011. And after a couple of years, he got enough feedback from individuals who wanted to understand, what was going on. I wanted to understand here. So I want to hear more about Alex. I want to hear more about Yassine, all these other individuals. So he ended up writing more books. But you got to understand, when I read this first initially, and again, I've reread it now, obviously, but when I read it initially in 2011, I'll date myself here, 14 years ago, or 20, right? So I'd kind of gone past the teenager years, right? That Alex Rider is, which is 15 in this particular book. So I'd kind of grown up, but I've been reading throughout the years, this particular book. So I still felt that affinity to him. And this book, I'll give a brief rundown of the story. Alex, as of the last book, if you checked out my book review, you probably see from the story, he didn't want to participate anymore in MI6. He doesn't want to be a spy. He doesn't want to do anything. But unfortunately, and there is a scorpion at the front of this book, Scorpia, which is the bad boys, the bad guys, the bad group, kind of come up with an idea. Now, they've been in particular set a challenge by a rich billionaire Greek guy. Hey, can you get these particular statues from one location? It's in a somewhere here in England. Send it over back home to Greece. Do whatever you can. And Scorpio decide, you know what? To do this, we're going to go and do a couple of other janky particular ideas, but we're going to put the blame on Alex Rider, and we're going to force Alex to become a spy once again, and for MI6 to use him. And so they planned out all these interesting different views. We've got a new individual that enters the scene in the Scorpio world against an enemy that he hasn't been seen yet before. But again, there's lots of references of previous Scorpio challenges and the failures as well. Set the scene as you might describe, and again, it's a simple book, right? It's meant to be read by kids. However, but again, I'm sort of saying this. I began reading this in my younger teens, and was still reading it in my 20s back when it was released. I think Anthony Horowitz, when he wrote this book, he probably would have had that idea that yes, there would be teens, youth that would be reading the book, but there's probably going to be a couple of adults who are going to be reading it, and it is a much more darker and somber story. So as the story progresses, and yes, Alex gets hooked in this particular plan, and he's getting videoed of all the challenges that are happening. It's a little bit more gritty. It's a little bit slower. The parts, so something that the books have never done before, but is done in this one, is that, yes, there is short and sharp chapters, but there's actually, the book is separated into parts as well, almost the backstory and how they're trying to get to Alex Rider, and the Alex Rider story that continues on. So even in that, the layout of the book is very different as well. It's as thick probably as the last couple of books, but just about as much words. Again, I'd probably say that the last 3 or 4 books have been probably 20 to 30% more words than the previous original ones. And again, going to individuals who are reading books for a little bit longer as well. Now, I won't give away too much of this particular book, but it does end in sadness, right? Two pieces, I guess, to call out. One, as it evolves, and in particular, there's in Egypt, and once again, Alex manages to survive and get out of it. Not everyone does, and that's the key call out. And whatever may happen beyond this book into the latest ones that I haven't personally read, when I first read this, there is a pretty catastrophic loss at the very end of someone very close to Alex. Kind of expected. I wouldn't have said so. Even rereading it, I went, I wouldn't I know if I would have really picked that would have happened, or Anthony Horowitz as the author would have had the ending to Alex try to be like this. It's sad. The very last page is not one of happiness. Everyone is seeing Alex as someone who's been deeply uh, disfigured emotionally, someone who's very different to the human that they saw. He's moving away from England, from where he would grow up. And so there's a lot of sadness at the ending, almost a release from what he came from, but not really a happy ending, not a happy story. Of course, he survives and the world doesn't blow up. And in particular, bad guy in this book, he reaches an untimely death that I'll obviously share. But the other real key favorite in this book as well was when Mr. Smithers, I do believe his name is Smithers, you find out his true identity. And if you've read this books at all I'll say is that he's this fat, jolly individual and doesn't particularly turn out that way. And you find out in this book who he really is, which is quite exciting. The deep, effective philosophy or the philosophy that comes out of this particular book, because again, it's a youth fiction book. I recommend it. I recommend the series. Duh, I'm rereading it again. Of course, I would recommend that you go and do that. So give your own read. And honestly, I just think it's an exciting, easy read. And, you get engrossed. I got engrossed in reading this. But the philosophical piece is the physical versus emotional pain. And man, let me tell you, there's always been physical pain in Alex's life throughout all the books, inclusive of this one. There's more physical pain, but there is a particular differentiation to emotional pain that gets introduced into the ending of this book. Something that has been at play in previous books, but I guess what makes this one even darker is the emotional play, not just of being played around with by the evil guys here, Alex, or being diverted into the ways that they need him to do, but the actual emotional attack that happens right towards the end. And you can see the broken figure that comes out of that. Again, when I recall back as reading this as a young individual, I went, as every time I've read the books and the physical challenges and the physical pains that he's experienced, not that I'd say it'd be, like, exciting, but it's interesting. It made me be like, "Oh, I wanted to read this. This is great." Imagination-wise, I go like, "Oh, imagine having to fall from this particular building or go down this particular, concrete chute. I have to roll off a car." You get it. It's action. But when the emotional turmoil is, hey, you get to sit there and watch, someone you care about really deeply has to go through the most horrific whatever, pain, disfiguration, termination of life, then that's completely different. And I even remember when I was a kid, young adult, reading that and going, "Man, that was pretty rough. That's a pretty rough ending." I kind of feel sad from it. I didn't like fully recover for a couple of days, that type of read. And again, reading it now as a older adult, I go, once again, I felt that like emotional pang, the being without across Alex Rider for all the series, and going like, man, I feel for this imaginary human, but it invokes obviously that emotion, I guess internally as well. Effective philosophy coming out of it for me is and see a lot of people in physical pain, even when you're in physical pain, right? Obviously, it's very easy to be empathetic or understand when that happens. Very hard to see someone in emotional pain. And the descriptions are used with Alex right towards the end is, like a ghost, like a shell of himself. He doesn't have the energy and the light in his eyes. That's a much harder thing to see in everyday life, right? If you've gone through emotional pain, everyone's gone through emotional pain. I've gone through emotional pain. We are often quite good at hiding it for those who can, for those who can't. Maybe you express it in different ways, but just in day to day life, it is often an individual that you might come across who might interact or present themselves or take some weird actions that you either might not expect of them or, seem strange or odd or confusing. And there might be some emotional pain hiding in those layers, right? You don't know what's going on in everyday's life. And so it's almost a reminder the effective philosophy is be strict on yourself because you very much know about your physical and emotional pain. You can kind of deal with it and do that, but be kind on others, right? Be kind on others because you never know what they're going through or the application to that as well. Now, some of you might say, yeah, but you should also be kind on yourself. And yes, I'd probably say yes. Be kind to yourself, but strict in yourself, uphold the discipline and the standards and the things that you do because you know yourself very well and you know the boundaries and what physical and emotional pain you're on, but you don't know that of others. So, if I was to stumble upon a 15-year-old kid who looks like the energy in the eyes have gone out, no light, seems like a shell, yeah, perhaps I might be a little bit kinder than I need to, because you never know the emotional pain that individuals as humans would go through. So that's kind of my little takeaway when I was reading this as well. But this book was definitely also much more aligned to being read as an older individual, as an adult, uh, grittier, the black the black cover on this particular book, and there's lots of covers for the Anthony Horowitz Alex Rider series, but this one kind of signifies more that, yeah, this one's a pretty deep one. And to summarize as well, uh, Alex Rider wants his life back when you're the world's most successful spy. There's only one way out. Alex's final mission will be the deadliest of all, and indeed it was. Immortalized, that's it for the Scorpia Rising book by Anthony Horowitz. The next couple of books I'll be reading are going to be the brand new ones. So I have no clue what they're about. So you're going to be going on the first read journey with me as well. I'm still finishing off some of the Lord of the Rings books I've got on the side. And I've got plenty of other good stuff to come along. So Immortalites, we'll leave it there. Support us in all the fun ways that you can. We love it. Immortalites, that's it. One out.